Welcome to Vinci's Discourse, where the minds of today's most innovative entrepreneurs are unveiled and explored. And my name is Kyle Campbell, your guide on this journey into the depths of the entrepreneurial psyche. So sit back, relax, and get ready to dive into the minds of the greats. This is Vinci's Discourse. Let's do it, baby. All right. So Sean, dude, it's awesome to have you here, man. Why don't we get into a little bit about yourself? What do you do? And more specifically, what do you love about what you do?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing customer experience my entire career. And for the audience that didn't really know what that is, and sometimes it's not as commonly a term, it's kind of combination of customer service, user experience, like website, but it's basically studying the entire experience a customer has with a company. And I did that for 25 plus years for companies where I ran their CX program. But about last year, I realized, that instead of working with one company at a time, I actually launched my own business. So I published my first book right here. I launched a speaking business. So I do coaching and conferences and corporate events, and then obviously a consultant as well with organizations. If you ever talk to someone who's in customer experience, they do it because they have a passion. And that's me for sure, because I have a passion about creating great experiences and ultimately avoiding really bad experiences, with customers, because I'm a customer. And I hate it when I get bad experiences, because we've all had them, right? You're pounding on zero and yelling representative, and then
Yeah,
getting
you're getting passed around.
bounced around.
Exactly, right? Oh, I got to transfer to
Yeah,
this department. Oh, wait, no, we're in the wrong department again. Transfer you back. And just back and forth
exactly.
game for 45 freaking minutes. Yeah, I know what you're talking
Yes.
about, man. So that's your gig then. I like how you name that customer experience rather than customer service, because
Yeah.
that terminology I think makes a big difference. Now, let's say that you're consulting for my company and you're helping me improve the customer service for mine. Let's say I'm running any entrepreneurial business, so that way it's relevant to everybody. Where would we start? How would we start to first analyze my customer experience and then start to improve it?
Yeah, there's so many ways. First off, I mean, we have so much technology and data at our fingertips now that we've never had before. Traditionally, you measure experience through surveys. That's kind of the long-standing truth. And there's things like that are called like the Net Promoter Score that measures loyalty, or there's a customer effort score that measures how hard is it for a customer to interact with your company, or there's things like overall satisfaction and trust. There's a lot of different things you can measure. So it really comes down, especially for entrepreneurs, to understand what their purpose is, what their value is, what they are trying to accomplish, and what they want that experience to be for their consumer. So I work with organizations, especially on the younger side, founders and so forth, on what are the things they should be measuring based on their business, their industry, their product and service. And we start to build a package of these are the kinds of things to measure, the kind of things to look at, to understand, because that's at least gives you that litmus test. Am I delivering what my customers need and want? Whether you're B2B, B2C, B2B2C, it doesn't matter. There's a strategy that's right for you. But it absolutely does not stop there. The surveys, in fact, are just a very small part of what it takes to study the experience, because you've got to understand the user experience. If you have a website or an app, you've got to understand, things of that nature. And so there's a lot of weblog data and content that you can study there. Journey tracking that shows how they're moving through your products. And then there's things like if you do actually have a phone center or a chat center to just do support, then you're looking at those transcripts as well to understand what were the conversations about, because you can actually get richer understanding of your customers using tools like text and journey analytics than surveys will ever tell you. So there's just so much rich data. And with the new technology, Gen AI and others, you can actually study that data at scale a lot better and glean those insights much faster than we've been able to do in the past.
Well, yeah, right on, dude, because that's what I'm talking about. If somebody gives you some feedback or some customer service experience, and then you analyze that conversation, you can really look behind the curtain with what the real problem is that they're facing. It might not actually be what they say. You can infer based on what they say what the actual issue is. It's kind of like the feature and benefit thing. If they might share the feature, but you can analyze the benefit that they're missing behind it. Analyze the customer journey that they're trying to experience but aren't able to with the current experience. So yeah, that's interesting, man, because you have to analyze what's going on behind the curtain. I love that. When it comes to actually figuring out how to uh, ask the questions on the forums, how do we know what questions to ask? So that way, when we are giving a form or a survey to our customers, it's going to give us the right data, the right feedback, so that way we can optimize our systems.
Yeah, there are standards. And unfortunately, there are also people who don't follow the standards. So one thing I always, encourage people. So, I've been doing surveys, I've been building surveys, I've been working in companies for 20 plus years. And, everybody thinks, oh, surveys are easy. But the reality is there's art and science to how to survey, because again, going to what you just said, Kyle, you've got to ask the right question in the right way to get the right, standardized result. So net promoter score, I'll just use as a brief example. A lot of people have heard of that from the standpoint, it's that if you've ever gotten a survey that's how likely are you to recommend this company, right? That is the net promoter score, and it measures based on loyalty. The official way to do it technically is as a relationship survey, so not tied to an interaction. That's really, it's about relationship, likely to recommend in the larger ecosystem. And you can a lot of people change the scale. It's 0 to 10, from less likely to recommend to very likely to recommend. And I see others that do it like 1 to 10. Well, that little change actually messes up the dynamics of the survey. And so, yeah, you really need to, do your homework, understand what you're doing. There are certain fundamentals, that I like to go with. Now, that being said, I think my biggest recommendation when especially in the beginning, especially with entrepreneurs that are early in the stage, it's asking for more. In this case, the written feedback, the comments that go with the score, because don't get caught too much in, I want to measure a score to have a score. It's really about the learnings, right? Because you're measuring so that you can improve your business on behalf of the customers. And so really understanding that. Again, customer effort score, I'm a big fan of. There's a book that anybody can go buy, The Effortless Experience. It came out in 2013. Matt Dixon, Rick DeLisi and team put it out. It's a great book. And it really talks about how in today's world, if something's hard, it creates disloyalty. Again, think about yourself. I mean, you blame this little magic computer that's in your pocket. If it's not easy, I'm out. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to go to a company that's easier to work with. And so you really have to focus on that ease perspective, because it truly predicts loyalty, whether or not the customer is going to stay or not. Because if it's hard, it's going to create disloyalty. You want to do your best to wow customers, create delight, but you can't have a leaky bucket, right? You can't have customers leaving out the back door, because they hate the experience.
Well, yeah, no kidding, right? So that's my question is, how do you go about formulating these open-ended questions so that you can have that answer, that data that you need to then, reposition or optimize your processes? How do you, what questions, what are some questions that we can have? Like, let's say I've got an email list and I want to send a survey out, not stock ABC kind of responses, but I want open-ended questions where they can actually type in their answers so we can analyze that text, maybe using AI as well. So what are some questions that we can ask to get the data that we need to start optimizing?
Yeah, I mean, in that early stage, when it's really about qualitative feedback, not quantitative, not scores. I mean, you want to ask about very specific questions about different types of experiences. If you've got a website or an app, you'll ask, what do you like about the app or the website? What do you not like? You want to get to just think about the response, what you want to understand and change. The good news about open-ended is you can almost ask about anything, really. It's not as tight as scale and statistical information when you're talking about, those numerics survey questions. But you really want to get to what you want to understand. a lot of times think of it too, it's not just about experience, but it's about, in this early stage, market research. You're kind of saying, what do you want from a product that, what do you want that from a product, from our product that does not exist today? You're seeking feedback from your consumer. And you're trying to get to that, in as easy a way as possible. A lot of companies, especially right up in the beginning, they ask one question. They say, "What would you like to share with us about our products or services?" And leave it wide open. Now, you'll get the gamut of responses there, but again, using AI, using text analytics, you can actually study all of that very diverse feedback you'll get, and start bucketing it. And potentially, if you're early enough and you've got a few enough, you can actually do some of that on yourself, just reading through and gaining insights from that. Those early, more qualitative, open comment surveys then can lead you to more numeric questions you want to ask later. So let's say you ask these questions and you get a lot of feedback like, the app doesn't seem to make sense, how it's designed. So you can then go through and make changes and go back and on the second round of questions or the next round of questions ask, what do you think about the design of X? What do you think about the design of Y? Do you like this or that? You can actually ask yes, no questions, or 1 to 5 scale questions, which is very common on, when everybody takes surveys online or on their mobile app these days. And so it can start to point you in a direction, and then you can start to measure those things. So digital user experience, for instance, is very common because you iterate, right? You're always making changes. And so every time then you tweak and launch a new version of your app, now you can see, did it go up or down? And too often your, things like effort or satisfaction may dip a little bit because people have to get used to the new way to do it. But as long as it comes back up and you can say, hopefully even comes out better, you're starting to measure that success.
Right, but the thing is, dude, a lot of people don't have the ability to give forms to their clients. I mean, I've had the experience. If let's say I've got 10,000 people on my email list, I'll send out a form to them, and unless you've got the right incentivization for them to take the form, it's difficult to get the answers because people are busy. If there's not anything in it for them, they're like, well, why would I bother doing it, right? So it comes down to the incentivization a lot of the time. But let's say somebody doesn't have an email list. How would they go about analyzing their customer experience without having to have one of these forums?
Well, it's interviews, right? At that point, you have to you've got to collect
Yeah.
the feedback in one form or another. And whether that's putting, a feedback section, just straight open feedback section on your website or your app, where as people are interacting, again, if you don't have an email campaign or an email list, then you find them where they are. The other way is, if as you're talking to customers, have that running list of questions you want to ask, and then just include that into the conversations you're already having about the product or service in support. Customers, we are all, as customers, going through survey fatigue because everybody is surveying constantly. And so response rates will be low. That is a nature of the beast, if you will, which is why I said earlier, you can get better data sometimes studying your call transcripts, your chat transcripts, your notes, anything that's already in existence. You can actually learn a lot from that, and you don't have to harass your clients, to take a survey. There are other tools, and again, using generative AI, there's actually some other new tools coming out there where you can either provide a link on the website or on the mobile app, or send an email if you have the email, and it actually interviews them via a chat GPT, almost chatbot. It'll actually interview them around the kind of questions you're looking for. And I don't like to give specific names of vendors on podcasts, but if you connect with me, cxforrocks.com, I could share with you some of those good companies, and they are really great for entrepreneurs because, again, it's about that relationship earlier on. It's about that connection and that dialogue. Something like that can be extremely valuable as well, early on in the process. And it is a lot more qual because you're having a conversation, not just asking for questions.
Yeah, see, I wonder if we can utilize technology like, screen tracking. You can see where their mouse moves or where their eyes are on the page, the hotspots, and model that with the existing traffic that you're already getting. I like how you talked about when you're on the phone with a customer already, you can ask them the questions that would be in the form. And what I think, where my mind goes with that is, instead of studying the transcripts yourself, I would just paste that transcript into an AI and be able to have it, give it the prompt and say, hey, look, I'm looking for this information from this chat. I've got, let's say, 100 conversations with 100 different clients. Analyze for patterns. I'll give you all the conversations. It's got all the data it needs from 100 conversations, and you can extract all of the data that you're looking for without having to do the survey. Another thing, which is an interesting idea, right? Another thing is using instead of the word survey, because like calling it customer experience instead of customer service, instead of using the word survey, which people hate, like you said, people have survey fatigue. What I like to refer to it as is a quiz, because with a quiz, it's got a fun element to it. People want to have the answer to their quiz. So if you can just get the data that way, you can understand where their sticky spots are, where you can improve your processes, and they get something out of it because they're getting a result to their quiz. So you could say, for example, what's your customer journey experience score? And that's, you ask the questions to get the data that you would need in your survey usually, and then give them their customer journey experience score if they're running a business. So people want to know that score for their company, and you get your data at the same time. So it's a win-win situation like that, right? No
Yeah.
survey
I
fatigue.
think the other one that we haven't talked about yet that's also extremely valuable, social media, ratings and reviews. I mean, again,
Yeah.
depending on the product, right?
Yeah.
Depending on the product, but man, Amazon reviews, app reviews on Google or on Apple. I mean, you've got so much rich data
Yeah.
in that as well. And there's some good vendors that actually will scrape that for you, summarize it all up, and give you the output. And so I know that's a ton of opportunity for folks, especially in retail, that don't get as much. They don't really know who the customer is if it's walking off the street and you don't have a loyalty program to track them. A lot do that. They really focus on those free services, Yelp reviews, or anything else
Yeah.
that's out there.
Yeah.
Those are really great sources as well, to read through. Even if you don't want to pay someone to kind of download and scrape it and study it, you can read through your own comments. And like you said, you can actually copy and paste them into your own information and study them that way as well. But there's so many options. That the challenge with most businesses, especially as they grow, is they have to mature. And so a lot of companies, especially founder communities that I work with, one, they don't even think about asking the customer any questions up front. And that's a mistake. You really want to start with that end in mind, that the customer is who you're building this for. And so the more feedback, the more dialogue, the more conversations, the more surveys or quizzes, really whatever you want to do playfully to call it, the more ratings and reviews you get, the better you're going to understand. And therefore, you don't make bad decisions up front that
Yeah.
end up potentially costing you business down the line. But then as you mature, you've got to make sure too that as your business matures and you grow, one of the biggest challenges, and I talk about it a lot in my book for Rocks, and I talk about, let me just kind of summarize what this Rocks thing is first off. So when you think about the customer journey we take now, it used to be pretty straightforward. You had a mailroom back in the day, where you sent, letters and stuff, and then you had, call center, and then think about how much more complex. Now you can text with companies. You've got chat bots. You've got, proprietary, communication tools. You got social media. You got all these new channels. Well, the landscape of communicating with customers and the organization has gotten so much more complex. What ends up happening as businesses grow is the silos get created. I call them, because I base my book really on understanding rocks. Rocks are what gets in the way of the journey. The journey is like a river. We hope we've developed this nice straight journey, like a very straight river with no obstacles. But the reality is our customers are here in Colorado, whitewater rapids. I mean, the river is winding around because it's bouncing off rocks. And then you've got rocks in the middle of the river that are causing rapids. And you pay good money in Colorado to go whitewater rafting. Customers don't want to do that if they don't have to with the companies. And so it's the rocks that get in the way. more often than not, the silos, what I call the sedimentary rocks of business, these silos, these layers of complexity, the lack of communication. This is where those stories we tell, I'm getting bounced from this department to this department. It's because of these silos. So as a business grows, you've got to make sure you're embracing this opportunity to understand how that journey flows, and you're building and orchestrating the journey to avoid the rocks completely. And you're looking for those opportunities to, drive change in your business positively versus change or silos or that nature actually creating more problem for your customers than not. And a lot of businesses that are growing, especially when they're growing fast, they completely lose sight of that. They're thinking of the next deal, and I've got to get this fixed, and I got to get, it's a lot of whack-a-mole. These things are
Yeah.
popping up, and you're
Right.
taking care of them. You've got to use that knowledge and continue to be talking to the customer so that you're creating less of a reactive mode, and equally putting into that the proactive approach to improving that as you're designing it and going. And that is one of the biggest gaps I see, especially in that as younger organizations are starting to mature, they've neglected that, and then they're having to fix things on the back end because their own growth has created a lot more challenges, a lot more rocks, if you will, in their business for their customers.
Right. Yeah. I love it, dude. I love the metaphor because it really does make sense. The way I'm thinking about it is the surveys, the quizzes, the feedback that you get about your current customer experience identifies the rocks in your river. And the goal is to essentially remove the rocks so that the river is smooth again, right? So you get the data, you make adjustments according to the feedback that you get. What's the next step? Let's say that I've surveyed my audience. I've asked them questions over the phone. I've analyzed their transcriptions for my sales team, and then I'm able to move them into the next step, which is first of all improving the customer service experience, the customer experience. Let's just call it that. I like it better. Remove the rocks, if you will. What do I do next after I've taken that survey and I've analyzed it? How do I continue to iterate to advance beyond surveys, beyond maybe even beyond customer feedback? Is there an internal way that you can continue to test and analyze without having to remove the rocks with customers? Because I want to take as much work from the customer off their shoulders as possible, right? So how do we do it? What are some of the next steps that we can move forward with?
Yeah, I mean, again, you've got to now start making data-driven decisions, right? And the easiest way, and again, this is sometimes um, you know, uh, too easy for people, is to just go after the biggest ones. This has the highest volume. It's the biggest problem. However, it may be really large and really frequent, but people don't leave because of it. It's not impactful per se. They don't like it, but it's
Right.
not. You may find something that's less in volume, but it's leading to more people leaving. It's very high in churn. So the biggest thing at that point is again, as your maturity grows, so does your data analysis, right? And this goes back to text analytics, journey analytics, along with the service, to study the entire experience and use the tools to really understand that better. But it's okay to also just take the approach of let's, make changes that we're seeing in the feedback. So a lot of younger companies as well, they can't afford to pay, vendors to do some of this for them, although there are some relatively inexpensive vendors out there and tools out there. So it's really about taking action. Now, you always have this as a business, you should always have a running list of what the hot topics are. Now, unfortunately, it's almost always a bigger list of things to fix than we have time or money to fix. And so that's why you have to kind of create this running inventory of what you're working on. And I kind of, at the tail end of my book, section 3 of my book, I talk about, all right, if rocks are the problems, what do you do with rocks? You break rocks. And breaks down into 5 different categories. Blast. So you can basically, if something is bad enough, blow it up. If you've got a process that all of a sudden you're realizing is awful, that's a rip, and take it out. And now, blast, the reason I call it that is if you just do that, or a piece of technology, like, oh, let's get rid of that and try to go find something new, that can have collateral impact. That's why it's called blasting. So you got to be careful of that. But if it's egregious enough, you may just want to rip it out. but blast. I mean, obviously we want to remove, the R and break. Remove becomes a really, that's ultimately the goal for any negative experience is we want to remove it, going back to get it out of the river completely so it smooths things out. That takes time. It takes funding. It takes, prioritization. So if you can, and if you have it, go for it. That's where you really want to run that. But that's not going to always be the case. So sometimes the E in break is erode. Sometimes you just have to tinker with it. You do little things over time to make improvements. Again, it means you're tracking it and you're talking about it monthly, quarterly, and when you're in the code or when you're in the product, you're just doing little tweaks as you go. You're kind of eroding the rock as you go. It's at least a short-term, opportunity, or actually long-term to get to that point. A is accept. There are going to be ones that you're like, I know this is bad, but I can't do any little things about it. And it's going to take a lot of money. I'm going to put it in this bucket. It's in the accept bucket, but I'm accepting it for now. I'm not, I'm going to come back to it and I'm going to revisit it quarterly at least to say, all right, can we do something about it now? But for a while, you may have to put it there because it has to be prioritized and funded, and time has to be available. And the last one is K, is keep.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and I want to let you know that I've got a free book that you can get if you want to tap into more of these resources. And you can get that for free at kylesbook.com. Back to the podcast.
There are going to be rocks that you have to keep. Now, I came from financial services for part of my career, and there are a lot of rules. Healthcare is another one. There are a lot of rules that are really problems for the patient or the customer, but they're legal and they're for their protection. And so you've got to keep those. And in fact, if you have those kind of rocks that you have to keep, what you really focus on then is it's about messaging. Why does it have to stay? Why is it so important? Make sure your staff can speak to that intelligence. So again, when you think about it, you don't want to measure and find things and do nothing about it. So once you find those items, use the BREAK, to go through that to say, all right, which of those categories does it fit in? And then again, I kind of call it just keep this running list of those categories and plan for that change. Again, whack-a-mole means I'm focusing on what I'm focused on right now, but I'm kind of ignoring everything else. Don't do that, because if at least you're thinking the long term, and you're thinking about all of these things that can and should be fixed over time, you know what to revisit, and you're able to then grow from that opportunity in a long-term stint.
Okay, cool, man. I like the acronym. It's sweet. The K and the S are very similar. I'm curious because the K is keep. You're trying to, this is a keep bucket for now, right? So this is something that you're planning on fixing once you have the investment funds or once some situation changes. And the S is, the way I think of what the S is, let's say at the beginning of a webinar, you have to say, in some cases, a disclaimer. And so that's there for legal reasons. It's a rock because it's a pain in the ass to say and to hear, but it's got to be there in some cases, right? So like you said, with the messaging, you can adjust it with the messaging and say, my lawyer, you can actually build rapport with some of the S's, because you can say, my lawyer made me do this. I don't feel like I have to. I don't want to. But I've got to say this, and you can kind of build some authenticity in there, so because you still get it over with, you still say it, but the messaging can be optimized so that way it's less of a rock, more of a smooth pebble, if you will, so or maybe even an advantage, because there's a positive to that too. So it depends on how you position it. What's the four?
I think of it as, so I'm a baseball dad. Two of my three boys, actually all three of my boys played baseball, some a little more advanced than others, and I coached and so forth. And so I think of what you do when you keep a rock is a lot of like what a catcher does behind the plate. It's about framing. You're taking it's going to be a ball. You receive it, and then you kind of slide it into the zone, right? You're framing that context, from potentially a negative to a positive, so that you can. So, thinking through that is, it is about, it's why, what's the benefit to the customer of that challenge. Those are all the things,
Right.
Again, password resets can be a pain in the rear, or these days now I'm getting more and more of your password needs to be 12 long. Well, all of the code, all of the normal codes I use for passwords are like 8 to 10, because that used to be enough. And now it's like, I gotta go 12. I gotta make up something completely new and add more letters. But again, I also don't want my account to be hacked.
Yeah.
I've had stuff like that happen. And so again, that's where the rock can be framed as, from the negative to the positive through that.
Yeah, the way I think about it is in a stream, you need rocks to, I mean, even you can look at the side walls of the stream as rocks. I mean, there will be rocks, or even if it's a beach, there's little pebbles on the beach. So there are rocks that shape the river as you move down it, as you traverse it. So it's less about the rocks being negative, it's more about putting the rocks in the right place in the right way, so that way the river flows the way that you want it to. And I think
Yeah.
that's where the S's and the K's come in. What's the
Yeah, I
four
had a
in
I,
four
I,
rocks?
there's actually dialogue at a lot of conferences that I attend where they're like, you need sometimes there's good friction. So the terms that are used in this space are you want an effortless, kind of like the book I described, effortless experience. You want a frictionless experience. You want a seamless experience. So you want it as easy as possible ultimately. But as a business, you want to also know, where do you put a rock that's actually good. So I'll just use an example. So with LinkedIn, a lot of us are on a lot on LinkedIn. I was in it. I was paying for a service, and I'm like, I'm going to stop paying for this service for a little while. But I want, obviously, I don't want to delete my account. Well, it was kind of messed up, I guess, how I did it. But instead of just deleting the paid service, I canceled my account. And what I didn't get was a notice, a rock that says,
Right.
"Hey, I just want you to know if you're doing this and not that." Now the good news is they immediately sent me an email and said, "Hey, did you mean to do that? And if not, click here." And because obviously people had done that before, I wasn't the only
Yeah, fair
one.
enough.
And it was like one button, I was back online. But so, it's just sometimes that the friction is not always bad. You
Mm.
want to focus on the bad friction, but sometimes it's not too bad to do that, especially if or if early customers are doing something that you see, it's like, okay, that you want to actually potentially put a rock in place, maybe a smoother one, put it in place to actually make sure that a bigger rock doesn't happen,
Right.
just downstream. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, the way you can think about it is even with the sales funnel. Let's say your goal is to sell a course or a high ticket service or whatever it may be. So sometimes the better way to do that is to put stepping stones, the rocks that lead to that service, to that high ticket service. So you could have like the way I think about it, you can walk on the river if you have rocks to walk on. So if it might be a free book and then a smaller upsell, then leading to the webinar that sells the bigger product. And these are stepping stones that you're taking people through. Technically the rocks in the way of the high ticket product that you're trying to sell at the end of the day, but they're necessary to lead them to that, again, navigating them through the process the way that you want them to
Yeah.
navigate, and also giving them the best experience, because nobody wants to be sold a $5,000 product right off the bat before you take me out to dinner first. It's like
Yeah.
you gotta take me to dinner, take me to the movies, and then maybe we can get lucky later, but first you got to take me to the movies. And so these are the weaves, the meandering that you take through the river at the beginning to get them to where the end goal is, and then
Yeah.
hopefully you continue the river instead of releasing them into the ocean, because then you lost them. So I
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
metaphor. Anyways, you can paint it all kinds of ways. So
Yeah. Well, and
cool.
what's funny is you actually are introducing what my second book will be. So my second book is actually going to be Path for Rocks. So it's the flip side of the rocks, like you're talking about.
Ah,
You can use, stones and rocks, if you will, the right way, and you actually create more of a path, something the
yeah,
customer is following versus something they're trying to avoid.
yeah,
Again, to your point, it's the flip side of the kind of the whole idea of rocks. The first book is very much focused on kind of that negative aspect,
right,
because again, and when companies are growing and young, so much focus is on the funnel. Get the
right,
funnel, get the sales
yeah,
funnel going. It's all about sales. And sometimes if you get a little bit too much blinders on, you can be ignoring the people going out the back,
right,
or leaking out the bucket,
yeah,
behind you. And so it's that duality. But yeah, when you design, so when the customer is reacting to the experience, they're flowing like the river and they're hitting the rocks. The more you orchestrate the experience, the more it actually is a path that has a design and function, and because of that has a less likelihood of bouncing around because it's orchestrated. It's the journey is defined. The journey it has been tested and retested by the business to make sure there aren't opportunities for them to bail out or get lost in that process.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I like the process. I like the way you're thinking about the customer journey, the making it as smooth as possible, but also orchestrating the steps as you go. I noticed the book is called Four Rocks, and I've asked you a couple of times, but we've gotten distracted. What's the four mean? Because I noticed in the stream there's four different. Yeah, I don't know if this is purposeful, but there's four different
Yeah.
curves. So what's the four stand for? What's that mean?
Yeah. So I kind of alluded to the one earlier about silos, but if you look at it on Earth, there are three different rocks. There's sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic.
Okay.
And technically, I said, well, you got meteors, you got meteoric rocks as well. And so, if you think about those four rocks, again, sedimentary. That is those rocks are created over time and pressure, and those are the ones that have very clear strata. If you look at Grand Canyon or anything, you see how everything's striped on the side, and that's been done over a long period of time and pressure. Well, that strata, those silos, the more complexity that your business gets created, the more channels they have to communicate with, the more departments they have to talk to, because not everybody can be trained on everything. Those silos and that strata are the sedimentary rocks. So knowing that it's possibility for that to be created, you can change it. You can get in front and try to say, I don't want to build more, of those sedimentary rocks and create more, more of those stratas. I want to reduce that. Right. So that's the first one. Metamorphic is change, coal to diamond. I mean, that's a good change, but change is a rock for customers, regardless of what kind of change it is. I've seen branding changes blow up companies in a horrible way.
Yeah, no kidding.
I've seen, obviously you change technology, you change products. I mean, New Coke, you remember that one? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no,
You
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
probably have heard the
Big
stories. I mean,
failure, man. You think it'd be better, like, on a blind taste test,
yeah,
it tasted better, literally tasted
exactly.
better, but then nobody fucking bought it because they wanted the
Yeah.
original. So,
So you got
yeah.
to be conscious of change being a creator of rocks and pain points. Igneous is fire, lava, right? Most of the earth is covered actually in igneous rock from lava. And think of that as, and I worked a lot in tech companies, and especially in like telco outages, major unforeseen events that happen. I mean, Facebook's outage, a couple of, I think it was yesterday or the day before. I mean, that a major rock, all of a sudden, it went down and the system couldn't be accessed by anybody, or,
Yeah.
data breaches, things like that. And so those are kind of your igneous, those fire, the trial by fire, if you will, kind of rocks that occur. And then meteoric rocks are from the outside. Of course, the biggest one we
Mm.
faced in forever is COVID. I mean, it came from completely outside, and it was a major rock for everybody. In fact, I think thinking back to like Deep Impact or Armageddon movies, it's like it was this extinction level events, kind of rocks, meteors for a lot of companies. They just didn't survive. So just thinking about that and understanding that if you know the source of where those rocks can come from up front,
Mm.
I educate in the book, here's what you can do about that. How can you plan for the unplannable or the unknown? Disaster recovery and things like that. How, et cetera. And so that's really where the four rocks comes in, is that, almost every, event or rock in the experience of a customer comes from one of those four areas. So proactively, if you know where those can come from, you can mitigate that. Now, when they happen, then you need to do the research, you need to find it, data-driven decisions, and then you could break them. You do something to fix them up. And I walk the reader through that entire process in the book.
You teased us with some tools that you wouldn't want to tell me. What's a tool that we can use? Be straight up with me. What's a tool we can use to start identifying the rocks in our company?
Well, I just say this. I like to talk about it. And then again, I like using word letters, right? So I like to start talking about started. The essence started, the first place is surveys, and that Survey Monkey, free service. There's several other free survey services out there. And, especially if your focus is on open end, and things of that nature, they're great to get feedback. You get the email and so forth. So I always say start with surveys. There are bigger vendors out there. A lot of them, that are out there. But I like to focus on kind of those younger, newer startup survey vendors versus the really big names that everybody knows. And so I would focus on surveys as the number one step, right? The T is transactions. The next thing you learn from is, what do your customers do? I mean, again, if people are leaving, their transaction is to churn or to leave or to, whatever. That's the second thing. Again, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they want to tell you, but then what are they doing, right? That's the start of really understanding what they're doing. And then any sort of associate notes. So the third area I would say is, if you have a CRM, or even if you don't, make sure you're capturing notes about your conversations, about your customers. That's rich data that you want to fall back on. And if you don't have a CRM, get something, organize yourself around a SharePoint or something where you're putting these files where people can refer to them, because people leave companies and change all the time. You don't want to lose that data, because those kind of associate types of feedback and notes are really rich as well. And those first three you can kind of read and ingest and understand. R is the next one, and R is a little bit different because it's about resolution. What you want to understand is, when people are working with you, what's their resolution experience like? So you know what the transactions are with the previous one, but are they getting things resolved, or how long? So sometimes things like sending tickets to an engineering department to fix something or whatever, that resolution process, study it, because lack of resolution is one of the number one drivers. Well, no, it is the number one driver, lack of resolution on high effort, which leads to disloyalty, like I talked earlier.
Yeah.
So people don't want something bad to happen. If it happens, they want it fixed quickly, efficiently, and on the first try. If you can't do that, you got to figure out why and try to move that forward. And sometimes, if you have a really good resolution process, you can actually get better satisfaction results after something bad that was recovered from than if nothing happened at all, right?
Yeah. It's
the
like
next T is
fight. It's like, like in school, if you fought somebody, like physically fought somebody, afterwards you've got a certain respect for one another because of that interaction that you had. Same way, if a customer has a negative experience, if you handle it the right way, they've got that rapport with you. They trust you more because they've seen what a negative could be turned into a positive looking like. They see what that looks like. And so that's a rapport opportunity. Let's get on to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the next T in start is transcriptions. So again, if you're talking to a customer on the phone, get that transcribed, the transcribe. So now you're starting to get into text analytics. So I'll go and say a couple of companies. Stratified is one that I've worked with in the past. Really good on text analytics. I'll go ahead and say on the survey side, beside Survey Monkey, Question Pro is a good one. I'll just throw a plug in for those guys. But Stratified is a great company for text analytics. They got a really great product, and they're not super expensive. So good for entrepreneurs and those without a lot of money. Again, there are others out there, so text analytics, again, studying that, understanding it, tying it to the surveys. So one of the richest things you can get, if people take a survey but they don't give you comments, which only a percent take surveys, and then only a percent of that actually give you decent comments.
Yeah, true.
So a lot of times, if you could take the transcript, let's say you have a post-call survey, take the transcript of the call, connect it to the survey results. Now think about the power you have. You know what they were talking about, their sentiment, their experience. You can really what it took to resolve their issue. I mean, it's such rich information there. And there are other new tools coming up that are using, as well in the Gen AI space. But and then the E is emotion. So going along with kind of the transcriptions, now is emotion. So sentiment. So I talked earlier, high effort equals 5 times more likely to be disloyal. That's how it works. If something's hard to do, it used to be 4 times, it's now 5. I'm 5 times more likely to be disloyal if something is hard to do.
Hmm.
Well, now add to that emotion or sentiment. High effort, not that emotional. I'm around that 4 to 5 times more likely to churn or be disloyal. High effort, high emotion in a negative way,
Yeah.
10 times more likely to churn because
Yeah.
you're tapping into that. So when you're tracking this text, the transcripts, you're not just, studying what are they saying, why are they saying it, what's happening. You can study the sentiment. Are they using very negative, angry language? Really good systems too, Stratified and others, Tether is another one, can pick up on, is it high, like volume, like anger volume, not just the word
Oh,
said, but like
interesting. Oh,
literally
right.
pick up on the
Hmm.
emotion as well. And then
Tonality. Yeah.
the last one is D, because we're kind of going pretty far on the started thing, but D is digital, and it's really about the journey at this point. And since almost every interaction now in as a consumer starts in a digital format, it's digital, it's a digital first world. That is very important to understand what people are doing. It's also very hard because the web logs and the amount of data captured, if I'm just on bouncing around somebody's website, the amount of data that creates is massive. So you have to have very specific journey tracking content to understand that, and understand what were they doing, what were they trying to do. But even more importantly, connect that digital activity to if they called in or if they then chatted, because it's not just about the digital activity, although that's very important as a standalone. It's also very important to understand how it happened. And Bespoke CX is a great company that I've been talking to that has a really solid product about, and it actually does survey and text analytics and digital analytics and journey analytics across channel. And so you have some vendors out there that are actually this entire started metaphor that I'm talking about. They're touching all the letters as they go.
And
They're pulling
integrating
all
them
that data
together
in,
and tying
yeah,
them
and
together.
integrating them together. And
Yeah.
that's the ultimate maturity, right? If you want to think about high maturity from a CX perspective, that's what we're talking about. Too
Mm.
often, mid to lower level maturity is doing one or two of those things as we go. So, but at the end of the day, you're trying to stretch across all of those areas, but you can't do it all at once. That's why I talk about started. Just get started. Go as far as you can. But then the very mature level, like Bespoke CX and some others, they're stitching that together across the entire experience and using AI to study it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
again, I dropped a couple of names in there, so folks hopefully benefit from that. But yeah, always open to chat with others if they want to know some of the other names and tools as well.
Yeah, perfect, man. Thank you for that. I like the way that the AI can tailor or even tie together and see how they interact with each other. Because let's say a customer has this experience with customer service, that there's a transcript either by chat or by phone, what have you. But then they're talking with a human, so there might be some filtering that's taking place. Whereas if they have some perceived anonymity. I always have a hard time with that one. Anonymity. Then they are able to really tell the truth, and then the AI would be able to correlate what they said with what they said when there was anonymity, and have that. Uh, Really, what I went back to what I said at the very beginning is going behind the curtain and looking at the consciousness that's driving their decisions, and be able to
Yep.
optimize your marketing and your experience based around that.
Yep.
So yeah, man.
And once you have that, you can actually predict.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
almost
See,
don't
that's
have to survey as much, but
yes,
you can kind of
right.
predict,
Yeah, that's
or
what I'm
even
talking about.
better, you can interrupt. Say, oh, they're going the wrong direction on this journey. I want to interrupt here so that we get
Yeah.
them back on path, right? And that's that ultimate maturity. And I will say the technology, chat GPT, generative AI, at least generative AI is going to change this forever. Because I had an issue with the bank, and I won't tell you their name, but I had an issue with the bank, and I dealt with them. I had to call them 3 times a week for 2 months to get the issue resolved.
Hmm.
It was for my brother's account, and his debit card was completely fried. We couldn't use it. We couldn't access any of his money. And every time I called, I got a new person, and I had to start over and explain it again. Well, now think about generative AI. Generative AI can as I'm entering the conversation with it's called an IVR, the phone tree, where you pound numbers or you talk to it. That's the IVR, interactive voice response system. But it could pick up at that point and, from a generative AI perspective, study the most recent history on my account and realize, should have 2 weeks into this instead of 2 months into it, realize this is a frequent issue and it's a major issue. Instead of just sending them to the same place every time, I'm going to send them to a specialty team that I've created. They're going to then own the issue. And actually, they're going to now interact with me via email to get it fixed. And I stop calling. I mean, because that's one of the things everybody talks about is we want to reduce calls because it's expensive to take calls. So it's like, well, then interrupt that poor experience in advance. The other thing it can do is it can summarize to the agent who answers my call. Here's why, here's the recent calls and why they talked about it. Because agents don't have time to read entire reams of notes about the past calls. Summarize it. Use generative AI to summarize those notes, and even potentially add to that. And they were online doing this. So this is where this new technology is starting to enable the seamless experience, the effortless experience. But businesses have to go into that with that in mind. Again, it goes back to silos and sedimentary rocks. You got to go into it with the idea that we're going to do this in a seamless way across the channels. We're not going to perpetuate the silos that most businesses do.
Where I see that going is I think we're going to be soon enough doing everything through AI. And I feel like the AI will be our personal assistant. And instead of us talking with, let's say, you calling at the bank and having to talk with them yourself, I see the AI assistant calling and trying to handle your problem for you, and it will be talking with another AI. So it'll just be completely seamless. They will understand each other. They'll speak each other's language. They will be able to have the problem solved without you having to speak to a single human. And I think that's coming relatively soon with an AI assistant, an AI agent handling your shit for you, and then having that customer service end of it completely automated as well. I've seen, like, for example, there's there's all kinds of companies that are doing this AI to AI customer service. One of the things that they're doing is, let's say for a pizza order, so the AI, you tell the AI, I want a pineapple pizza, whatever. The AI calls the pizza place and AI answers from the pizza place, and they talk to each other, and you can hear them talking to each other the same way humans would, but they understand each other at a deeper level. They know what to do, what not to do. There's no training involved as opposed to a human. Like, training is instant. You just upload data, and it's I think that's going to be very cool, man. So the future in this industry
we're probably not as close to that as I think most of us would like to think.
Yeah.
But I also want to counter something for you there. I personally, this is just my personal opinion, for certain things, that'll be fine. The easy stuff, right? Ordering pizza, sure, no big deal. The challenges are going to be that a lot of companies are already saying and talking about, we're going to use a chat bot so that we can get rid of our call center. There's a lot of mindset of that for what I would say are short-sighted companies.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. The more technology we throw at customers, the more they're going to want the human connection. Now, there are certain industries and certain businesses that probably not, I can't say that the same story, but in a general sense, the more technology we force, because think about the companies today that they don't have call centers. They don't have ways to get a hold of them when something's really awful, visible as a carrier or Facebook. The biggest complaints are, there are times I just need to talk to somebody, but they won't let me. There's just no way to do it. So flip side of that, same AI now, because I was asked on a panel a couple of years ago, and I know we're getting up on time here for our time together, but I was asked on a panel 2 summers ago before ChatGPT was announced, what's the contact center going to look like in 5 years? And I said, well, you're going to have someone who really loves to talk to people. They got a great personality. Maybe they struggle a little bit with multitasking, because being a phone agent, that's where I started my career, is hard. They have to balance like 20 different systems and bounce. It's really hard to do and memorize all this stuff. Well, now I don't have that skill, but I love to talk to people. I can be having a conversation and the AI is doing all the work. It's bringing up the articles and that I need to understand in a pithy way. It's capturing from the audio. If I say I want to sell 10,000 shares of Apple, it'll plug in 10,000 shares of Apple. New age agent is like, yep, 10,000. All right. And they're just kind of watching everything, but the AI is doing the work, and the efficiencies gained there. It's so much faster, and things like cross sell, upsell become easier. I said that was 5 years ago, 2 summers ago, and then when ChatGPT came out, it may not be up to 5 years. It may be closer, because again, these things are advancing so fast.
Yeah.
So again, I think this is where you have that opportunity to, think about, not just for business leaders, this is a specific message to them. Don't just think about ways to reduce cost and use technology for that purpose. Think about how do you enhance the experience, and very importantly, even still that human experience using the same technology. And everybody's kind of going after the chatbot, but again, you're seeing all sorts of news of horror, of things that are going really wrong with chatbots. So it's going to be some time, because companies, with the company's data is not in good order. It's going to take a while for those chatbots to actually be able to be effective. So
it's gonna take some time, yeah, but I can't wait till the day, man, because I hate dealing with the humans on the phone a lot of the time. It's like we said, transferring from department to department. It's like, I feel like there was an AI that I could just talk to right now. It would be a whole lot easier, because humans make mistakes. That's the problem. And the AI doesn't make mistakes. And so if it's properly trained and the data is there and it's able to make the responses based on the input that it's getting, then all the power to it. I can't wait for that, man. But
well, think about this: the AI empowered agent. There are no departments. As an agent, I can do everything, and there's no need to even pick and which department do I want to talk to. I just pick up the phone. I'm talking to someone.
Yeah.
Because that AI agent, now they can do everything. The tool is still doing most of the work, but it's a person. And again, you're a little younger than I am. I still like to call sometimes. I know, the generation above me still wants to talk, right? And so it's going to take a while for all of that to switch out. But yeah, it's an interesting time, and the experience, if orchestrated right, if thought about, from the journey perspective, it's just going to get better and better, because we all deserve it. We've been dealing with bad customer experience and customer service for way too long. So it's about time that we really start seeing some results.
Sean, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I feel like we had a productive conversation, and it's interesting to analyze the customer experience like this. So yeah, thank you for being on, brother.
Absolutely. So for everybody out there, cxforrocks.com right here. Reach out to me on that. You can find out more information. And yeah, thank you so much for Kyle, for having me on your podcast. We'll talk soon.
My pleasure. Yeah, talk soon, brother. Okay, bye.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. And if you want to get a free copy of my book, go to kylesbook.com and you can get a copy there. I'll talk with you soon.